Welcome to Outside Xbox and the very first gameplay from Dark Souls Remastered, in this case with us playing on a PS4 Pro console. We had an hour to play the remaster of 2011's Dark Souls, from the very beginning of the game to a meeting with an old vitamin D loving friend.
Oh, aha. So I didn't scare you. I have a proposition, if you have a moment.
It turns out that amount of time was just enough for us to remember what the hell we were supposed to be doing. After our all too short time with the game, here are the 5 most important things we learned about Dark Souls Remastered. Depending on your opinion, this is either the good news or the bad news. Graphically, Dark Souls Remastered isn't hugely different from the original game. Yeah. It's obviously more crisp than its original console incarnation, what with its 1080p and 4K resolutions, but as you can probably tell if you've played the game before, it features all the same geometry and high-resolution versions of the original textures. Still, that means a lot more of the gross detail in the enemy designs lost in the 720p console versions is now ickily obvious. That's a good thing, right? I mean, it's supposed to be a good thing. Ew. The biggest visual changes are improved lighting effects and what appears to be the addition of a super subtle motion blur. It was difficult to tell though, because we were busy being smashed in the head with a giant club. Could have just been double vision. As the title very honestly suggests, this game is definitely a remaster rather than a full-blown remake, so everything that looked a bit weird or rubbish in the original game is probably still going to look a bit weird and rubbish. I'm looking at you, Bed of Chaos. But are you looking at me? I can never tell. Some pretty low-res textures are still present, particularly on buildings at a distance in the Undead Burg. The problem is, with the new higher resolutions, it's now possible to see just how blurry they are. Speaking of things at a distance, Lordran sightseers will be sad to hear that there's nothing added to the already vast view distances. For example, don't expect to be able to see things milling around in the Blighttown swamp from up in Firelink Shrine. If you've only ever played Dark Souls on Xbox 360 or PS3 before, or not at all, Dark Souls Remastered will still be a treat, but we have a sneaking suspicion PC players used to 4K resolutions and fan fixes are going to be underwhelmed, to the point where we wonder if the game will offer a free upgrade to people who already own it on PC, like 2K did with the BioShock collection. Really though, in terms of changes to a beloved game, it's sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If the developer had fiddled with the art style substantially, it's guaranteed that hardcore Souls fans would have been unhappy about the changes. On balance, we're just happy to have a modernised, definitive version of what is still the game we love. Anyway, it's not the most important thing. This is the most important thing. Yes, the graphics in Dark Souls Remastered might just be cleaner, crisper versions of the original assets, but it's the frame rate that's the key here. During the hour we played, we never once noticed the frame rate drop, even when a ruddy great dragon was scaring the bejesus out of us. What even is a bejesus, and why do we need one in us? I reckon I could probably manage without it. Frame rate might not be as immediately sexy as graphical fidelity, but it's actually way more important. Dark Souls Remastered feels fluid and responsive, and no longer can you place the blame for your death on the fact that the frame rate dropped momentarily during an otherwise straightforward sword fight. I was distracted by a bird flying past the window. The notorious Blighttown will still be the real test of Dark Souls Remastered's 60 frames per second, given that it reduced the original game to little more than a single-figure frame rate slideshow, but we weren't allowed to see that yet. Probably because if we had footage of it, it's all anybody would be talking about. There was some speculation about whether this game would be the original Dark Souls world but adapted into the engine of Dark Souls 3 and feel more like the more modern third game in the series. I mean, after all, we've already established that Dark Souls Remastered will upgrade the game to 6-player multiplayer like the later games in the series. Having played it, we now know that's definitely not the case, and it's almost certainly a good thing. Although the improved frame rate makes the game feel more responsive, the timings, animations, and fat rolls are all exactly the same as they were in the original game. If you've developed years of Dark Souls 1 combat muscle memory, it's all going to be perfectly applicable here. Along with that though is the same occasional camera weirdness that was mostly ironed out in Dark Souls 3. We're talking about the sort of camera weirdness that leaves you staring at the Taurus demon's furry bum while he proceeds to squash you flat. Still, it is a very high resolution furry bum. Trying to look on the bright side here. Oh, and unlike Dark Souls 3, no walking around while you drink your Estus either. More's the pity. Don't get us wrong, playing the original Dark Souls at 60 frames per second and in 4K on an Xbox One X or PS4 Pro is a very tempting proposition, and it'll absolutely be the definitive version of this classic game. But if you're only going to buy Dark Souls Remastered once because you're literally not made of money, those might not be the versions to get. With the remaster being quite light touch in terms of its graphical upgrades, the Switch version might actually be the version to buy, even though graphically it's probably even more similar to the original, as long as it can stick solidly to its modest 30 frames per second limit rather than violently dropping like the original game did. After all, Dark Souls is perfect for playing on the move. A bus journey is just long enough to complete a soul retrieval run or have a couple of cracks at a boss, though you might find yourself sailing past your bus stop if you finally get the Taurus demon down to a quarter health for the very first time. So yes, I'm here on an Xbox channel telling you to buy the Switch version instead. I'll hand in my badge and gun now, shall I? Probably shouldn't have had those in the first place. Though our gameplay was limited to the very first part of the game, we've also received some screenshots that show areas from later in the game. If you have never played Dark Souls and want to avoid spoilers, avert your eyes for a moment. For everyone else, these give a better idea of how some of the much loved areas of the game have been polished up for the remaster. Check out Spectacular Anor Londo, for example. Praise the sun indeed. And though we couldn't bring you 4K footage on this occasion, these screenshots also give you an idea of how the game looks at that higher resolution on the Xbox One X and PS4 Pro. It might be an old game, but it scrubs up nicely, right? So there you go, that's your Dark Souls Remastered gameplay and screenshots. Is it everything you hoped it would be, or were you anticipating a more comprehensive remake? Let us know in the comments, and if you'd like some more technical information on the remaster, click this nifty video on the left that tells you everything you need to know. Alternatively, you could watch this video on the right where Andy and I tackled Dark Souls 3. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, it super helps us out, and we'll see you next time on Outside Xbox.